Alright, so, as you might have seen from the title already, it's a little bit of a heavy topic, but all I want to do is show you some facts and let you draw your own conclusion. I've been doing a little bit of research into Canada, and what I found is a little bit shocking because I did not know this myself, and I'm not sure how many people knew or actually look into this kind of stuff, but it's pretty interesting. On the screen, this is an image showing a chart of the revenues and expenses of the federal government for 2023 to 2024. The figure is in billions, so as you can see, the budgetary expenses is just under 500 billion, okay? And of course, majority of that money coming from the personal income tax from all of you people. And here we can see where it's going to. So, transfer to other governments, so other levels of the government, only $106 billion, which is a little bit shocking, because, you know, that's like just a little over 20% of the budget. But then you look at under here, transfers to persons, 126 billion. So, okay, that's for the people, for the CPP, I'm assuming, and the elderly benefits, and for children, which makes sense. You know, I'm all for that. But then you have direct program expenses. So you're telling me that it costs $221 billion. The biggest portion of our budget goes to directly funding and operating the federal government. Like, I don't see how they would need $221 billion to do that just for the year. And of course, I was not able to find more details about this and what exactly defines these operating expenses and the other transfer payments. But all I can say here is I know that there's no way that it costs 221 billion just to operate the federal levels of the government. That just seems like a really overinflated figure to me. So, of course, Canada is right now, with everything going up in price and all the inflation, which of course minimum wage is not going up, which is pretty sad to see because now a lot of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford to live a better life than that. Alright, so Canada has committed more than $8 billion to Ukraine since Russia's February 2022 invasion, which is a lot of money, obviously, and I'm just gonna say it, I think we should have used that money to actually support Canadians because Canada is really struggling recently, and it seems that a lot of Canadians are actually not even able to eat anymore. I understand and all that it's a war going on in Ukraine and everybody wants to help them out and all, but the one problem here is that I believe personally that we should be spending all our money that we can to help Canadians, you know, our own people, as much as we possibly can, because all you need to see here is that 1 in 5 Canadians reported going hungry at least once since March 2020. 1 in 5. 7 million people out of the 38 million people that live in Canada. 1 in 3 Canadians who earn less than $50,000 a year report instances of not having enough money for food between March 2020 to March 2022. 23% report eating less than they believe they should because there wasn't enough money for food. 61% of Canadians see the cost of housing to be the largest financial obstacle preventing Canadians from being able to afford food, a number that has almost doubled in the past year alone. Now, in my opinion, that $8 billion could have done a lot and at least, obviously not completely fix the problem, but it would have been a big help to millions of Canadians, which is honestly shocking to think that we're sending all that money to Ukraine when this kind of conflict isn't even our problem. We are kind of unnecessarily getting involved in another country's conflict. And of course, our people are the ones to suffer for it. Now, here's another big issue with Canada. So, as we all know, the justice system is very, very inefficient and it does not usually deliver justice. Or I would say as most people would consider justice. But, now here's something quite shocking that I'm sure lots of you did not know about. So, the average Canadian household income for 2023 the annual salary in Canada was $59,300. The average annual salary is less than $60,000 in Canada. Now, here's another scary fact. So, as reported in the year of 2020, the average federal inmate costs 126,000 Canadian dollars in Canada. $126,000. And to make matters worse, that is 31,773 adult prisoners reported in custody in 2021. So, that means that Canada is spending over $4 billion just to support prisoners. Now, I may not be an expert on financial issues, but that does not sound correct to me that it should cost more than two persons' average incomes in Canada to support one prisoner a year. Something doesn't sound right. Like, you can't seriously be telling me that it costs that much money to give some food, shelter, obviously power the facility a year. Now, here's another kind of scary part about the justice system in Canada. The study found that 55% of provincially sentenced offenders had re-offended. More specifically, of the sentenced offenders released in 2007 to 2008. 43% committed a new offense that resulted in a provincial or federal custodial sentence, and 12% committed a new offense that resulted in a community sentence. Now, to me, that sounds like failure of the correctional system in Canada. That sounds like a terrible failure on their end, because, I'm sorry, that is terrible. 55% of provincially sentenced have reoffended. That is terrible. So you're telling me that essentially we're sending these people to jail, we're spending $126,000 over two people's salaries of hardworking Canadians go to supporting these people to sit in jail, be released, and then reoffend again, because majority of them do. So that sounds like a complete failure by our government, and that's honestly an embarrassment in my opinion. The entire idea that it costs that much money to actually hold somebody in a prison cell to think about some terrible crime that they did, like for example, murder, aggravated assault, robbery, well, I think that there should be some kind of harsher sentencing done if you're telling me that majority of them are just excited to go back right away, reoffending, and they don't care. So apparently the correction did not correct them at all. And of course, here a lot of criminals, they're not afraid of actually being sent to prison because they know they'll be right out, or it's not even going to be that bad. Because of course, this is Canada and our prisons are like a luxury. But in my opinion, I think a really good solution, because I don't want to just present the problems, I also want to present possible solutions. I think a great idea would be to, like potentially set aside a portion of land, because of course Canada has an absurd amount of empty land, and we could completely isolate off this part of the land, send these people to this part of the country, wherever it is, maybe an island, maybe somewhere up north, and throw them in here, make sure they can't escape this section of land, and have them just survive. No rules, no interactions with them. They're simply gonna have to live without society in the wild. And I guarantee you that would humble them. Because having to survive just a week, gathering your own food, hunting, keeping yourself warm if it's cold, and of course, protecting yourself when there's no authorities around to protect you from other inmates, that will really quickly teach them to really respect and want the societal standards that are provided to them. Because it's ridiculous that they just don't care about going in prison and just are right away reoffending. And if they have to survive in the wild too, I'm sure that that would be very humbling for them, because that way we wouldn't need to send inmates for 25 years, let's say if they killed somebody. Instead, send them for 2 years into the wild. If they survive, I guarantee you they're not gonna offend again. I'm sure they'll learn their lesson after just a couple of years. So not only do we need to not waste our money, they also don't need to waste their time, and they can learn a harsh lesson very quickly. Because what is this like BS going on here in Canada where we're gonna treat these inmates like with luxurious treatment that costs $126,000 a year, while they should actually be punished for something that they did horrendous that probably hurt many people permanently, and they'll be out in no time at all on top of that. It's ridiculous and it's a joke, and the justice system seriously needs some kind of complete rework on it. Like, it needs to be completely remade. It's a joke as it stands right now, and I think that we really need to introduce some changes really quickly because it's getting out of hand, especially with all the recent crime. Now, once again, I just want to point over to Canada. So Canada has given more than $8 billion to Ukraine, but aside from that, look at the total development spendings and donations that Canada has made in 2021. 7.8 billion American dollars. That is a little bit ridiculous in my opinion, because I think that we really need that kind of money to, of course, feed the starving Canadians, but I guess the government that we pay and trust with our lives do not think that way and would rather send it to other countries, which I really God hope that that's going to other countries. But honestly, with what's going on in the government now, it's really hard to trust that that's the case. And it's honestly really tragic how a lot of Canadians are struggling while our government is focused on not the Canadians and its own citizens, but of course external citizens. Sorry, not even citizens, but it's kind of like a pathetic joke when you think about it, but it's not a joke. It's terrible, you know? Like, it's the same thing essentially as, imagine you really wanted to get some food. You were really hungry, and your parents pull into the drive-thru for McDonald's and they buy the person's meal in front of them, and they don't buy you any food. That's essentially what Canada's doing to our own country, their own people. They're kind of looking the other way while many people, and a lot of them happen to be Indigenous, are struggling on the streets, and Canada seems to just be abandoning them once again. It's pretty tragic and sad because we could really use that kind of money, but oh well, I guess the government has different plans. Alright, so now let's move on to a little bit of a worse topic. So here we have the 2023 federal income tax brackets. And as you can see here, Canadians making the average annual income would be paying 20.5% on federal taxes, and then of course, personally here, I live in Alberta, so I'm just going to look at the Alberta tax brackets for the provincial taxes. They would also be paying a 10% provincial tax. So over 30% of their money is going to go to taxes, which is just great. You know, like, that's a pretty high tax rate. I know it's not the worst in the world, but wow, like, for the country of the free, that's quite a bit, especially. But then, of course, you would think, oh well, that's at least going to go to, let's say, all of our needs and social services and our education, our healthcare. You would think that it's worth the sacrifice to have a little bit less money for yourself, well, quite a bit less money for yourself, so that everybody can kind of work together and the community can kind of have a better experience overall. It would be okay, and in my opinion, I would totally be all for that if that's really what the money was going to. But it's really hard to believe that the money is going to that because despite the high spending on Canada's healthcare, the system is failing really, really badly. Like, in my opinion, I think we honestly got some of the worst healthcare in the world. And that's just because of the wait times. Like, for example, whenever I've needed to go to the hospital, I've never really had to go that much myself, but if, let's say, this happened to me like quite a few years back, I broke my finger, and I went to the hospital, I ended up waiting 9 hours to get a cast for my finger, and essentially I actually broke my finger like up near where the knuckle is, and they gave me a cast just on the finger. So after 9 hours of waiting, they actually gave me the wrong cast that made it a lot worse because it wasn't actually holding the part that was broken. So I ended up going home, sleeping, fidgeting, and it was way more swollen in the morning. But then I went back to the hospital, had to wait a very long time, and they finally gave me the right cast. And I'm thinking all of that wait for a healthcare system that I've never needed to use really up until then, and they can't even treat me properly the first time, and I have to come back, and it takes them forever anyways because I have to wait, like, I think the total wait time was like close to 15-16 hours just for a single cast that took them about 10 minutes to put on. That is a little bit ridiculous, but okay, I guess there's people going through more severe things, so I guess I'll have to wait almost a day just to get a cast. But then I had a issue where my mom, you see, she never also needed to go to the hospitals at all. She was kind of a very healthy person. And one day something happened with like a nerve in her back. We're still not completely sure what it was, but she told me it was the worst pain she ever felt in her life. She was not even able to walk properly and constantly shrieking in pain, and it looked really bad. So I took her to the hospital, drove her there, helped her, walked her in, and you know what they say to her at the wait desk? Oh, the wait's gonna be 48 hours. 48 hours for somebody who's been paying taxes for decades without fail, and of course never needed to actually use the healthcare system before, yet the one time she needs it, they fail her. And of course they were very rude and said, if you don't want to wait, then just deal with it. And we had to go back home. My mom ended up having a family friend come check up on her because we have a family friend who's a doctor, and she ended up getting better after some time. She ended up going to a chiropractor instead, and the chiropractor did some adjustments, and that helped her up a bit. And eventually she made a full recovery, and she's back to being a normal, walking around person again. But still though, without the help of the, of course, healthcare system that she is still paying for, because it's not optional here, because we have that public healthcare system. So it's a little bit ridiculous that they're failing that badly here. For example, Canada ranked 23rd out of 28 countries for the highest number of somatic care beds dedicated to physical care, on an age-adjusted basis. Japan, the highest ranking country, reported nearly 3.5 times more somatic care beds per thousand population. Canada also has far fewer physicians available, ranking 28 out of 30. MRI machines, ranking 26 out of 29, and CT scanners, ranking 27 out of 30. Now that is pretty ridiculous to me, of course, because, 13.3% of our budget goes to the healthcare, which is a lot of money. And of course, Canada loves to brag that they have the public healthcare and that their healthcare is so good, but it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Every time somebody has something serious happen to them, they end up just simply saying, oh, we can't treat you in Canada because we don't have the funding and we don't have the equipment. So they'll fly you over to the States anyways, where you then have to, regardless, pay for the treatment, which is kind of ridiculous because, of course, it's very badly inflated over there. But if you have insurance, you're perfectly fine, and at least you'll get treated instead of waiting in a line till you die, like here in Canada. Now, let's talk about something pretty interesting here. So, of course, everybody here in the West kind of frowns upon Russia, especially now with the whole Ukraine war going on, and it's like, okay, I see, yeah, war going on over there, like, yeah, people are not gonna like the country, but we gotta still look at the facts as they are. So, in Russia, as of January 2021, tax residents pay a 13% flat rate tax on annual income, up to 5 million Russian rubles, which is equivalent to 70,000 Canadian dollars, which is lower than the actual higher than the actual annual salary in Canada. So technically, most Canadians would be paying 13% flat rate if they lived in Russia, which is a big change from over 30%. And of course, anything above that 5 million Russian rubles would be 15% only. So only a 2% increase, which is honestly quite shocking in my opinion, but and of course, if you're a non-resident, then you have to pay a 30% rate, but really, if you're going to live in Russia and be paying taxes, who's not going to become a resident? So that's a little bit of a joke in my opinion, but that the fact that Russia has such lower taxes than us, but you would think, oh, okay, yeah, well, Russia, it's probably terrible to live over there because in the West, everybody thinks like if you walk on the street and say like I don't like Putin, they're just gonna execute you on the road. But realistically, that's not what happens. And I have talked to people in Russia, and I know people that come from Russia, and they say that, oh yeah, people all the time talk bad about Putin. It's not as bad as people in the West make it out to seem. It's just kind of an average country and the people are just trying to live their lives over there. But now here's a very interesting chart for you to all look at. So here, as you can see, this is a very interesting index, a very interesting chart of data. So how this chart works is it measures a country comparing it to New York. So 100 level index would be the level that New York is at right now for certain conditions. And this is comparing other countries to life in New York City. So here you have the cost of living index. So here Russia has a 32.1 value. And by the way, this data is for modern day 2023 mid-year. So this is very recently measured. So a 32.1 index for the cost of living means that it is 67.9% better to live in Russia and cheaper than it is in New York City. And then you have the rent index, which is 9.4. So that means that the rent in Russia is 90.6% better than it is in New York City. Cheaper, sorry. And then the cost of living plus rent index, so basically living index entirely, is 21.3. So it is almost 80% cheaper to live in Russia than in New York City. So here we have Canada's index, which is cost of living 68. That's quite the jump from Russia, more than double. Then you have the rent index, more than triple. And then you have the cost of living plus rent index, so the average together, 51.7. Now, in my opinion, that is pretty bad. That's more than double, way more than double Russia's. So how does that happen? Where we have more than double tax rate and we are living more than double worse than Russians? That doesn't really make sense. But then you could think, oh, well, Russia is, let's say, oh, a terrible country, like the corruption and, oh, they're stealing all the money and it's terrible conditions there. That's what you would think. But then, Russia has a free education system, which is guaranteed for all citizens, and it's also university level, so masters, bachelorettes, all free and paid for, and all you need to do is be a citizen, and you can get free education. And of course, they have some of the highest levels of education to offer in the world. Now, that is an embarrassment to Canada, because now, let's take a look at Canada. So, of course, they don't offer any free education. You have to pay for all years of schooling. Every parent has to pay for all years of schooling. And now let's take a look at the university costs for tuition. So this is for 2021 to 2022, so very recent. For an international graduate student, not only do they not get any free education, it's constantly increasing, 3.6% higher rates for the annual change, and it is over 20 grand. Now, international undergraduate students, whoa, $33,000, and of course an increasing rate. And now Canadian graduate students, over 7 grand, also increasing, great. And Canadian undergraduate students, over 6 grand. Now, that's a bit ridiculous to me because these are all annual tuitions, so you have to pay them for every year while you're going to school, which is a lot, usually like 5 years, I believe. That is a joke compared to Russia, who is paying far less taxes, has a far more affordable living cost, and provides free education. Okay, well now let's take a look at transportation. So here you have it in Russia, a troika ticket. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. You have apps on your phone that you basically purchase tickets for the metro, and a single trip will cost you about will cost 42 Russian rubles, which is equivalent to 50 cents American, which is equivalent to 59 cents Canadian. Okay. And that doesn't sound bad for a ticket on the metro, you know, like that I would say is pretty fair. But then let's take a look at Canada's metro, the TTC. A single fare ride for an adult is $3.35. Now that is kind of a joke in my opinion. So not only do they have far less taxes and all of that, not only do they have free education, but their transportation is dirt cheap compared to ours. And of course, it is ridiculous with where I live, the bus passes, because you can buy that monthly bus pass. It's costing over $100 a month, which is really bad for a lot of university students, I know that. And in Russia, it would be dirt cheap. So, why is Russia beating us in like every aspect? Something doesn't seem right here. And of course, Russia has this amazing education system, one of the most reputable in the entire world, and the country's adult literacy rate is over 99%, almost 100% in 2018, which is the fourth highest in Europe. Of course, apparently Ukraine has 100% rate, which is quite unrealistic in my opinion, but whatever. Now let's look at the population. So Canada has over 38 million people as of 2021. Russia has over 143 million people as of 2021. I must say that is ridiculous because you would think that, oh, as you know, it would kind of work the same. Population increases and fluctuates. It's going to be harder to sustain that, and you know, the quality of life will kind of get worse with the overpopulation. But how is it that Russia is handling it? Handling it way better than most of the world. How is it that they can have so many people, way more, over 100 million more than Canada, and have such better quality of life? So, in my opinion, we should learn from Russia. Now, I'm not saying, oh, yeah, Russia needs to be the better country and it's amazing and it's like, I'm not trying to worship it here. I'm just trying to simply state the facts as they are. Here we have it, everything worse in a more developed country than Russia. And if that's the case, that Russia is doing far better than us, why are we not copying what they're doing? Why are we not doing what they're doing? Because obviously they're doing something right and way better than us. Or is this not actually a problem with the system, but a problem with the leadership? Is it potentially that Trudeau is, I believe, the most hated politician, honestly, in like Canada's history? And you're telling me that we have this many problems when he's in power for, I believe, like 2 terms already? That is kind of sad because I believe that there's some very bad things going on in the leadership with Canada right now. I don't think all of these people are just pointlessly hating him. There's definitely a reason for it. And I may not be a complete political genius on Canada's politics and all of that, but I do know that something is very wrong if this many people are gathering to scream traitor at him. Wherever he goes. So it is really sad to see, but I believe that there's some very deep corruption in the system and very deep corruption in the leadership. And I think that honestly the only solution here is some very, very vital changes, and very soon, because the increasing number of hungry Canadians and the increasing number of poor Canadians cannot last forever. And it's going to hurt a lot of people. Right now it's hurting a lot of people daily. It's even killing people. It's just something to look into. And of course, I only researched this topic for a couple hours, so obviously I might not know everything. I probably for sure have missed some important details. So if any of you could relay that information to me in the comments, I would really appreciate, because that's the whole point. What's the point of having a discussion, and what's the point of bringing up a topic if you're not open to debates? It's kind of joke here because a lot of people don't want to hear any other points of view, but I would love to hear anybody's point of view on this. I would love to hear any kind of opposing arguments or even alternate ideas. And honestly, that's what we should be focused on, because as a country, because if we don't listen to everybody's voice, then essentially we're just a monarchy that doesn't listen to anybody but the top people in power with all the money, which is kind of what we're turning into slowly. And I really hope that that changes soon. But yeah, please, if any of you guys have anything else to add on to this, I'd love to hear it. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have the great rest of your week, great rest of your month, honestly just great rest of your life.